Thanks so much for attending this webinar today. As you can see, this is the session 4 of the Community Scholars Program webinar series. Previous webinars were about what is community engagement research and the ethical principles when conducting research with human participants. Today, we are integrating these concepts to focus more specifically on the ethical considerations of community engagement projects. I am Margarita Echeverri, Associate Director of the Community Engagement Core of the Louisiana Clinical and Translational Sciences Center. We appreciate your time attending this webinar. At the end of the presentation, we will be open for questions. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the website. This is on our agenda for today. After this session, we expect you to be able to discuss how ethical principles apply to the community as a whole, give examples of key ethical issues faced when conducting community engagement studies, and be able to evaluate and make decisions about key aspects in the study design and research proposal. As explained in the second session of this webinar series, community engagement research is a broad term that includes different levels of collaborative efforts between community partners and investigators. Regardless of the level of community involvement, community engagement projects should be based on the contextual consideration of the target community. Projects should be designed as a response to the social and structural, political, or health issues affecting the community. That means that projects cannot be successful if they are not grounded on the community to be impacted. Community engagement studies are also based on building collaborative partnerships between the investigators and the community, so they together join forces to produce results. Community engagement projects include direct participation of individuals affected by the research, so the impact is produced in the same community. Community engagement projects include research methods that allow to identify problems, but also create solutions to those problems. And finally, community engagement projects are expected to produce positive outcomes to the community in order to improve their quality of life. Now that we remember what community engagement research is, let's review a little the key ethical principles to hold when conducting studies with human participants: respect, beneficence, and justice. In the traditional research, the focus is on individuals and regulations required to respect their autonomy and protect their privacy and confidentiality. The beneficence principle requires conducting research that do not harm or hurt participants, but also that do good or produce a benefit to them. However, in case that the research produces positive and negative impacts in participants, it is important to be sure that at the end, the benefits are higher than the harms. The last ethical principle focuses on justice, and that the benefits and harms are equally distributed among all participants. That means that no groups in the research are more exposed to harms than benefits, and vice versa. Justice also requires that resources are distributed according to the needs. This means that individuals with more needs may receive more resources in order to equally benefit from the research. When applying these ethical principles to community engagement studies, we change the focus on the community as a whole instead of the individual. The respect principle now calls for projects that consider community priorities and interests and assure that community voices, initiatives, and recommendations are not only taken into consideration, but are highlighted and prioritized. The beneficence principle extends now to the community. Be sure that all expected benefits are greater than the possible harms and risks to the community. The justice principle now considers also the equal opportunity to the community to participate in research that affects them. So now that we remember these concepts, let's focus on some examples of key ethical issues that are common when we are conducting community engagement studies. One of the concerns is related to time. As community engagement research is built on trust between the community and investigator, it implies that a relationship between the two groups needs to be created before even considering on engaging on research. Building this relationship and creating rapport requires not only time, but also dedication from both parts. Considering that submitting a research grant has fixed deadlines and writing the proposal is time-consuming, some investigators do not consider working with communities. However, a major benefit of conducting community engagement research is that the study is really addressing a need. If the project is relevant and considers community preferences, it may have an important impact in the community outcomes, and this will really produce more satisfaction with our jobs. The second concern is related to data collection. As most of community engagement studies include human participants, it is necessary to follow the human protection regulation. This implies writing a protocol, getting approval from the institutional research board of the institution, obtaining informed consents, and also recruiting, enrolling, and retaining participants along the study timeline. This process definitely implies more time in data collection than other research methods, like when we are conducting research in secondary data, the data is already available, so we don't have to use our time collecting data. However, a major benefit of conducting community engagement research is that including the community members in the study helps to protect the community from abuses and increases trust and participants' enrollment. The last concern is related to dissemination of results. As community engagement research requires dissemination results to the community, it implies more time and efforts from the researchers to present results in plain language, while at the same time writing manuscripts for the scientific community. Unfortunately, promotions in academic ranks are usually based on publications and presentations in scientific journals or conferences, and usually do not consider publication in other venues like community forums where the community receives direct feedback about research findings. In community engagement research, the collaborative approach between the community and investigators calls for equal involvement of all partners in the research process, but also recognize the unique strengths and weaknesses that each partner brings. Here are some examples of ethical issues related to respect and autonomy. First, we need to know who are the team members and be sure that they do represent the community and the research institution. Although it is common to have community advisory boards in community engagement studies, having a community advisory board does not guarantee that the research is engaging the community. It is necessary to verify that these members not only represent the community, but also can speak for them and have access to the community network to elevate community voices in the study. At the researcher side, it is important to look at the representation of the investigators in the institution and the perception that the community has regarding this institution. History or perception of this institutional power imbalance can negatively impact community trust. Second, a community engagement study implies a partnership. It is important to identify members of the team who can speak the other's language. This is community members who understand ethical regulations and research terminology, as well as investigators who understand the community and know their history, values, and social dynamics, but also understand qualitative research and ethical regulations on recruitment and consent of participants. And in community engagement studies are not just to collect data and publish results. This is more deep. They should focus on addressing community needs and having a positive impact in the community. Here are some examples of ethical issues related to justice and beneficence. Who benefits more for the project? The community or the researchers? In the community side, who benefits more? Those who are directly involved in the research or all the community as a whole? In the researcher side, who benefits more? The researcher as an individual or the institution as a whole? Or what happens when the partnership once data collected is completed? If the partnership becomes inactive, it is not a community engagement study. In community engagement studies, we go further. Results are presented to the community and scientific audiences in the formats that facilitate understanding and discussion. Another important concern in community engagement research is the need to be extra carefully on reporting results that may hurt the community. This could create negative stereotypes to their members. For example, when we are reporting negative health behaviors in vulnerable communities or problems of violence and crime, it is highly recommended to discuss these results with the community and together decide the best language to be used. Considering that in community engagement studies, there may be more barriers or delays in conducting activities, it is possible that projects cannot be completed on time. So when we are reporting advances and results to the funding agencies, it is important to use the best language also to do not harm the reputation of the community, the researchers, and the institutions. So this is like a summary of the key concerns that we are looking at the ethical issues when conducting community engagement projects. Now we are going to transfer those a little to the time when we are writing the proposal. We are looking at the key points to consider when we are writing a proposal to conduct a community engagement project. Here, I want to use the slogan, "No research about us without us." Although this was used for a specific purpose to address research with people with disabilities, I think that this motto is definitely applicable to all research conducted in the communities. The questions to review a continuation, I copy or adapted them from a curriculum that is focused on examining community institutional partnerships. I have the link here and really recommend you to look at this curriculum if you are interested in having deeper training in this topic. So now let's begin. So the first section of the proposal describes the need, rationale, and expected impact of the study. Questions to consider when addressing ethical issues in these sections of the proposal are about the justification and expected impact of the study. Usually, the impact of research studies are defined in a long term, so the community really does not see the change in their quality of life or solution of their problems during the study. The only way to provide solutions and take action is involving the community in the definition of the needs and objectives of the research. So unfortunately, you usually write and submit the proposal without consulting the community. And we wait until it is awarded to begin to engage the community in the study. So at the end, the community is not having the opportunity to really participate in definition of the needs and objectives of the study. So that is what we are trying to change with the community engagement research, is that the community representatives in the research team help in writing the proposal. This other section describes the type of research or intervention to be developed. Depending on the type of research that we are working on, educational, clinical, or applied research, it is necessary to clearly state how the community is involved and at what levels. Will be the community only in charge of recruitment of participants? Or will the community play a higher role in the collaboration? In order to increase the role of the community, we need to develop capacity building and it's important to clarify what kind of training opportunities will be embedded into the study. That is very important in research with community engagement projects, is that the community begins to receive training so they can perform higher roles. Depending on the type of research, we need also to consider if the methods used to collect data, usually in community research projects, is like surveys, interviews, focus groups, are appropriate for the different members of the community, and that they also address any literacy, language barriers, and also cultural, social, and religious differences. In this section of recruitment and consent, describe who the participants are and why they are selected. It is important to state clearly who is the community and how it is defined in the study. What is the distribution of the community by race, gender, age, marital status, educational level, etc.? As different community members could have different perceptions, we need to be sure that there is a balanced representation from each group. In the regulations to protect research participants, there are special requirements when we conduct research with community members who are vulnerable, like pregnant women and children, but also who may be in disadvantage, like homeless, or isolated, like prisoners. In this section, it is necessary to state clearly if some of the individuals will be excluded and how they will be protected, or how. Yeah. We also need to explain the number of expected participants to be sure that results will be scientific sound, and how we are going to avoid or address any possible bias in data collection. Biases such as implicit bias, no response bias, or social desirability bias can really pose important limitations in the generalization of results. This other section focuses on recruitment and consent. In this part of the proposal, we review the approaches to be considered when inviting participants to join the study. In this section is where the community has the control. In community engagement studies, community members highly contribute in the development of research materials, such as invitation letters, advertising flyers, radio announcements, telephone scripts, and they also review any kind of surveys, interviews, phone calls, so they are totally address the community needs. It is important to clearly state also how, when, where, and how often participants will be contacted for the data collection, and how privacy and confidentiality will be protected. As participants in community engagement projects may be recruited at their homes, community events, clinics, or schools, it is crucial to look at possible coercion to participate. If the physician, teacher, public health representative, or other with power are the ones recruiting and collecting data directly from participants, it is highly recommended to provide a statement of the investigator relationships to the participants. Conducting research when there is a power relationship may have potentials for coercion. While incentives are appropriate to compensate for participants' time and effort, it is important that the incentive is not highlighted in the enrollment process and is not the first thing that the participants see. The last point in this session is how to be sure that the informed consent is really reaching the objective. If people sign the consent without reading and understanding it, so it is no longer an informed consent. Unfortunately, many consents are too long that participants do not read them. Although it is common to have a summary of the consent to be read or explained to participants during the enrollment process, most of the time the consent becomes more a document that is kept in the study file. So in community engagement studies, it is suggested that to review and confirm participants' consent during each research activity to be completed. That shows respect for our participants. This session provides a description of how privacy and confidentiality will be protected during the study. In data collection, a main ethical concern is how to address privacy and confidentiality challenges when community members are conducting the recruitment and data collection among participants who may be their colleagues, friends, family members, or neighbors. In order to address this ethical challenge, it is important to require community team members to receive training regarding human protection regulations in the conduction of research, and also declare any possible ethical conflicts of interest, not just financial conflicts, also ethical conflicts, and sign an investigator confidentiality agreement. Regarding protection of data collected, ethical challenges are about how to protect the data, but at the same time give access to data to team members using it for reports or analysis. A key point is to be sure that team members are not saving data or files on their personal computers. Using this data for other purposes may put the research of participants at risk. Recommendations are to de-identify data before sharing it with the research team, and that investigators also sign a confidentiality agreement. If the study includes recording videos or audios, it is highly recommended to include in the consent an explicit authorization of participants to be recorded every time we are recording them. This session about the IRB protocol focuses on ethical issues in distribution and compensation of research team members and participants in community engagement. Generally, in community research studies, it is important to have a fair distribution of research funding. Today, it is common practice that community team members be compensated according to their expertise, role in the study, and time dedication. Unfortunately, in the proposals, it is common to see budget allocation for consultants, investigators, and also students, but not so much for community partners. Another ethical challenge is about the role and benefits of volunteers working in the study. Although they are considered volunteers, it is important to look at the responsibilities of these volunteers. and the project expectations of the commitment and performance, as well as possible ways to compensate them, such as reimbursements of transportation, internet, and phone expenses, and if possible, giving them tablets or other devices that may facilitate the participation in conducting project activities. This is the final session I want to discuss today. As you have learned in the previous webinars, the Institutional Review Board is in charge to review and approve studies that involve people and communities as research participants. Although each research institution may have different procedures for the review and approval of studies, it is required that the IRB always includes members with expertise in community engagement and the community target in the research. Main challenges in community engagement studies are the level of involvement of the community team members in the development or revision of the IRB protocol. If the IRB allows the inclusion of community members as principal investigators in the protocol, and also what are the training requirements for these members. Unfortunately, these 3 points are still in high debate. So the recommendation is to clarify with the IRB these points before you are writing the proposal and the research protocol. So this is the end of the presentation. I saw this image and I think this is a good summary of the main points discussed here and why ethical research matters in community engagement studies. We are now open for questions and comments. Thanks again for your participation and time. Okay, as there are no questions, I will end this presentation. And I see there is a chat here. Okay, it's great presentation. It looks like there are no questions, so this webinar is ended. And thanks so much for your time. Again, we're gonna post this webinar in our website. Thanks so much.